Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Sean Wilson. Thank you, Greg, for that introduction. As he said, I am the national organizing director for Dream Corp Justice, a bipartisan program that is committed to opening up doors of opportunity and closing prison doors. Prior to that, I was the American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin's Smart Justice Campaign manager. And the Smart Justice Campaign is a nationwide campaign that is committed to reducing the jail and prison population and fighting racism within the criminal legal system. And so oftentimes I get the question from a lot of folks whenever I'm doing these types of conversations or doing these type of speaking engagements are, why do we need criminal justice reform? Why do we need to let people out of prison? Why do we need to be smart on crime? Why? And so there are many answers to those questions. And I had a PowerPoint created, but I am experiencing some technical difficulties on my other laptop. So I don't have that at hand. I apologize in advance. However, I prefer to have a conversation with you all more so than to talk at you. And the goal is to gauge your understanding of the justice system and to give you a 2020 vision of the system from someone who has actually experienced it. And so to answer the question, why do we need criminal justice reform? We are a country that represents 5% of the world's population. However, we have 25% of the world's prison population. We have over 2.2 million people in our nation's jails and prisons on any given day. And many of these individuals are there as a result of nonviolent crime. And so that answers the first question as to why we need criminal justice reform, because we have a problem of incarcerating individuals for crimes in which they shouldn't be in prison for. Many of these individuals are in prison as a result of drug abuse, alcohol abuse. And so instead of putting these folks in cages, we need to find treatment for these individuals. And I am someone who has spent 17 years of my life incarcerated. I was sent to prison at the age of 17, the age that many of you are on this call today. At the age of 17, I was convicted and waived into adult court and sentenced to 17 years in Wisconsin Department of Corrections, 17 years of which I did. While I was there, I was able to see firsthand the injustices that occurred within the confines of a prison setting. I was able to see the dehumanization, the deprivation of my fellow human beings, and even me myself having to live in a room where I stretch out both of my arms and I'm able to touch both walls, where I was only able to walk probably 5 or 6 steps before I was at the other end of my cell. And so no human being should have to live that way. And it is that reason why I came home after my period of incarceration and made a commitment to not only expose this system for the injustices that exist within it, but to let the public know that their tax dollars were going into a system that was causing more harm than good. And so the Smart Justice Campaign is working all over this country to reduce the prison population, to fight racism within the criminal legal system. And the way we are doing that is by centering the voices of directly impacted people, centering the voices of directly impacted communities, those individuals who are proximate to these issues, those individuals who have experienced it firsthand. Because oftentimes we drive past a prison, or we see a picture of a prison, and we see these walls and we see these barbed wire fences, and we think that those barbed wire fences and these walls are to keep the quote unquote criminals from coming out to harm us. But when in reality, those walls are there to keep you all, the taxpayers, the public, from coming in to witness the dehumanization of your fellow human being, your fellow neighbors, family members, loved ones, or your fellow human. And so I feel that it's very important that those of us who have experienced this live our truth, speak out, speak up, and get other individuals involved. And so I'm honored to be able to share space with you all and to share a little bit about my experience of incarceration, so that you can all be informed on what this system is and what this system does and why there needs to be a change within it. And so we here in Wisconsin are working on a variety of issues that will begin to reduce the prison population. One issue in particular that we're working on is probation and parole reform. Probation and parole reform for many of who is anyone on the call? Does anyone on the call know what probation and parole mean? Does anyone know what that mean? And if so, could you raise your hand and unmute yourself? And Jalen Moore, could you unmute yourself? You have your hand raised, I see.
Sorry, my camera doesn't work, but I would have raised my hand. I do know what parole is. It's when you are assigned to like an officer and they have to monitor your activities and make sure you don't do anything illegal, of course, after you've come out of prison.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're absolutely correct, Jalen. Thank you for that. And that's exactly what it is. Once you get out of prison, you are under supervised release, meaning you have to report to a parole or probation agent. And so here in Wisconsin, we are sending folks back to prison each year for violating a rule of parole or a rule of probation called technical revocations. And so when you are released, you are giving a list of rules. I am not allowed to talk to Jalen. I am not allowed to talk to Jennifer. I'm not allowed to talk to William. And so if I am seen talking to you all, if my agent is aware that I am speaking to you all, they can potentially send me back to prison for having a conversation with you all. That's called the rule violation. And so here in Wisconsin, we're sending 3,000 people back to prison for breaking rules similar to that, at a cost to taxpayers of over $200 million. And so what is happening when folks are sent back to prison is that they lose their job. They are separated from their family. They're separated from their children. They're separated from their community for violating a minor rule of supervision. They're not committing a new crime. They're not committing a new crime. They're just violating an arbitrary rule of supervision. And this is causing more harm than good. And so I may have just ran into Jennifer in a grocery store, harmless interaction, said hi to her, and went about my business. That right there could potentially disrupt and change my life for the worse. And so it is those type of policies that we are fighting against here in Wisconsin because of the harm that it's causing, because of the financial cost to the taxpayers and the human cost to communities and individuals who are impacted by that. And we believe that if we are able to change that policy, we can prevent 3,000 people from being sent back to prison each year. We believe that we will be able to save taxpayers $200 million each year. And so that is just one issue that we are working to end here in the state of Wisconsin. In addition to that, we are also asking for an expansion of a program within Wisconsin Department of Corrections called the Earned Release Program. It is a drug and alcohol treatment program that addresses individuals who are suffering from substance abuse. And so this program cuts 6 months off of an individual sentence after they go through the program and receive this treatment, and allows them to re-enter society early after they've gone through this treatment. After they've gone through this program. We believe that this is a very productive program, and these are the type of programs that individuals should have access to if they are sent to prison as a result of drug or alcohol abuse. And so we're advocating for an expansion of that program. The program currently has 750 available beds, and there are over 3,000 people on the waiting list for this program. And so we're asking for an expansion of that program. I see that there's a question in the chat, and so I'm going to go ahead and answer that question. How would the parole officer know about minuscule violations? Do officers follow their assigned persons during the day? Well, so for example, say Ellie and I happen to run into one another in a market. And Kathy, who knows that Ellie is on probation and that Ellie shouldn't have no interactions with Sean. Now, Kathy doesn't like Ellie. And so Kathy says, you shouldn't be talking to Sean. You're on probation. I can tell your agent and disrupt your life and get you sent back to prison. So what Kathy does is call Ellie's parole agent, and Ellie's parole agent call Ellie and say, hey, I need you to come in. We just received a call that you had contact with someone you shouldn't have contact with, and I need you to come in. You go in and your agent place a hold on you. A hold is basically you being placed in jail for a period of time while an investigation occurs. And so Kathy says, oh, we were at Pick and Save. We were at the local Pick and Save. This is where Sean and Ellie were speaking. This is where I saw them at. And so the agent, if they want to follow up on this information, they can go to Pick and Save and ask for the video if it's serious. You know, this is something that's, it is very minuscule. And so you wouldn't think that, you know, someone can be sent back to prison for having harmless contact or a harmless conversation with someone that their agent is deemed inappropriate, will send you back to prison. But this actually happens, unfortunately, in Wisconsin and in other parts of the country where technical revocations or rule violations send people back to prison. This is a nationwide problem, and it is one of the biggest drivers into state prisons all over the country, and specifically here in Wisconsin. And so it is a major issue, and so we have to advocate for individuals who are impacted by this, and we have to make sure that we are asking our elected officials to put forth legislation to prevent this from happening. Maddie asks, based off of this, how would someone know who a parolee should or should not be talking to? That's a good question. And so certain people wouldn't know that. I think folks who are like very close to an individual may be aware of that. For example, if someone goes to prison if someone goes to prison and they're co-defendant. So say, for example, Jackson and I are co-defendants. Jackson and I both were caught stealing. Jackson and I both receives a certain period of time in prison. We get out, and Alexa knows that Jackson and I went to prison for stealing. Alexa knows that Jackson and I shouldn't hang out with each other because when we get together, we do dumb stuff. And so individuals who are close to you may be aware that you shouldn't be having this type of association. And if they have a dislike for you, they can make a phone call to your parole agent and disrupt your life. And so it's more so folks that are close to you that you know, and who and also knows that you shouldn't have contact with certain people. That's how a lot of folks will know. And there's other rules that folks violate. I just gave the example that the no contact example. But there are rules, for example, that says you cannot enter into an establishment where the primary sale of alcohol is being sold. There are rules that said that states that you are not allowed to move from your residence without prior approval from your parole or your probation agent. There are rules that says that you should not travel outside of the state without permission from your parole agent. And so if someone close to you who doesn't like you and who knows you're on probation, see you in another state, and they don't know whether or not you have a travel permit to travel. And they may make a phone call and say, I saw Katie in Chicago. And the agent can respond, thank you for that information. Katie has a travel permit. So, thank you for letting me know where you saw her. Or the agent can say, thank you for that information, and then follow up with Katie and say, I never gave you permission to travel out of state, but I received a report that you were in another state. Yes, the contact rules can be effective, especially in cases where there is spousal abuse. And so a lot of these contact rules relates to spousal or domestic issues. And other contact rules relates to individuals who are co-defendants on the same case. And there are also contact rules related to a location. So say, for example, Katie, you committed a crime in New York, or you committed a crime in Wisconsin. And there are certain areas in those states where your agent may say you're not allowed to go. And if you were found in those areas, you can potentially be sent back to prison. Is that why some people have to wear ankle monitors? It varies. Folks are given ankle monitors for a variety of reasons. And so that varies. You have some folks who wear ankle monitors because they are living in a temporary living facility, and they are only allowed to go from the living facility to work. And so to keep track that they're going from the living facility to work, folks are given ankle monitors. Folks are given ankle monitors because it is a prerequisite to being released, so that the agents are able to keep track of them. Those are reasons why folks are given ankle monitors. It varies. It definitely varies. But the reason that we are in this mass incarceration crisis is because for the last 50 years, there has been a tough on crime marathon, so to speak. There has been introduction of tough on crime policies in response to a rise in crime in certain areas. And the response has been lock them up and throw away the key. And that response is ineffective, it's harmful, and it is the reason why we are currently sitting at over 2.1 million people, 2.2 million people in jails. We have mandatory minimums. We have truth in sentencing. Here, for example, here in Wisconsin, truth in sentencing requires you to complete 100% of your time instead of getting out early. You have folks who are being sent to prison for nonviolent offenses. in previous times, folks probably wouldn't be sent to prison for these nonviolent offenses, but they're being sent to prison as a result of the tough on crime policy. I see there's more questions in the chat. How do you feel about the comparison between mass incarceration and Jim Crow? I agree that comparison is accurate. I believe, honestly, whenever I talk about mass incarceration, I always try to talk about it from a historical context, because we have the 13th Amendment that says neither servitude nor involuntary slavery should exist. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as a punishment for a crime. And so we believe that yes, chattel slavery was abolished, but it was replaced with a more sophisticated form of enslavement. And that more sophisticated form of enslavement is mass incarceration. The same thing that folks experience during enslavement, during slavery, individuals are experiencing the very same thing in this modern state of incarceration. And the reason I say that, you're branded with a number. Back during slavery times, human beings were branded with iron. You're branded with a number. The dehumanization of human beings in the system is continuing to be ongoing. And so I believe with that designation that mass incarceration is the new Jim Crow. Yes, will police be able to protect the person on probation if something were to happen to them? Yes, as re-entering citizens, you have the right, and you should be protected by law enforcement if someone were threatening you with harm. And so I will say yes, they should be protected. What age were you when you let out? So I was let out of prison at the age of 34. So I went in at the age of 17 and I was let out at the age of 34. And it really did not necessarily affect my educational track, with the exception of me obtaining a formal degree. But while I was in prison, I was able to take college courses. And as I said, I turned my cell into a classroom. And that is the reason why I'm able to do the work that I am currently doing. Working when I first came home as a mentor, as a speaker, I started my own personal training business. And I was tapped to sit on various panels. I worked for an organization here in Milwaukee called Youth Justice Milwaukee. I've sat on panels at Howard University. I've sat on panels with some very prominent and influential individuals to talk about justice reform, why there's a need for it, and had the opportunity to share my experience and my perspective. And working for the American Civil Liberties Union for over 3 years, and being able to build out the campaign for smart justice here in Wisconsin has given me greater insight into the legislative process. And that's why I am continuing to advocate for legislative change around justice reform issues here in the state of Wisconsin, and now throughout the country as the national director for organizing with Dream Corp Justice, which is an organization founded by Van Jones. It previously was called #Cut50, but now it's called Dream Corp Justice. We have 3 programs: Dream Corp Justice, which is focusing on reducing our jail and prison population. We have Dream Corp Tech, which is committed to providing marginalized communities with tech sector jobs. This Dream Corp Tech was found by the entertainer Prince, along with Van Jones. And then our other program is Dream Corp Green, which is advocating for climate change in marginalized communities. In the case of nonviolent crimes, what would be the most suitable way of correcting the offender? So just real quickly. One of the things that we try to do within the work of justice reform is disrupting the language. And so we try not to refer to individuals as offender or inmate or convict. We try to use people first language, understanding that these are individuals who have made a mistake. And so we want to make sure that we are humanizing them and providing, giving them access to treatment and programming that will begin to address the mistakes that they have made. And so the most suitable way of correcting individuals who commit nonviolent offenses is figuring out why they committed that offense in the first place. Many individuals in our prison system throughout the country, many of them suffer from mental illness, undiagnosed mental illness. Many of them suffer from drug and alcohol abuse. And so I think figuring out why they are committing these crimes and providing them with the treatment that they need to address that. Sandy, if the parolee committed a violation, would they have another court hearing, trial, or would they just be sent straight back? So in Wisconsin, they actually have a hearing in front of a administrative judge, an administrative law judge. And so the parole agent acts as prosecutor, basically, and says, Sandy moved from apartment A to apartment B. She did not have my permission. And so because of that, I am recommending that they be sent back to prison as a result of not having my permission. And so the administrative law judge can look at all of the evidence that the parole agent or probation agent is presenting and say, I agree with you, parole agent. Sandy needs to be sent back to prison, and I'm going to send them back to prison. And so that is the process here in Wisconsin. In other states, it may be different, but here in Wisconsin, I know that is the process. If so, do you think? Yes, I think that that is, I think that so if so, do you think that it's just? No, I don't think it's just. I think if someone has not committed a new crime, they should not be sent back to prison. Violating the arbitrary rule of supervision is not enough reason to send someone back to prison, disrupting their lives, disrupting, if they're a parent, taking them out of their kids' lives, taking them out of their community's lives. And it should not be, this burden should not be placed on taxpayers. Taxpayers have to pay here in Wisconsin $36,000 to $38,000 a year for each individual held in our state prisons. What is it that drives you to be better even when all the odds may be against you? What drives me to be better is the individuals that I left in prison who actually would never see the light of day. What drives me to be better is justice. Justice indicates that harm is going to be repaired, that harm is going to be restored, that not only the perpetrator will be made whole, but the individual who has been harmed will be made whole. And so that's what drives me. What drives me also is the promise that I made to my grandmother, who died 2 weeks prior to me coming home from prison and who stood by my side ever since I was born. She drives me. I made a promise to her that I was going to do this work, that I was going to work to not only change my community and the state that I lived in, but ultimately the world. What drives me is you all. You all are the next generation. And so I want to be the best example that I can possibly be and use my story to encourage you all to fight against the injustices that we witness every day. My story is not unique. This is happening to little Black and brown boys all over this country, and it's also happening to young white kids as well. And that is something that white folks are realizing, is that many individuals in their communities and in their families are impacted by this justice system. They're not impacted disproportionately at the way that Black and brown folks are impacted, but they are impacted. I've traveled this state and I've had conversations with folks in rural Wisconsin who have come up to me and have said to me that my son, my daughter is suffering from opioid abuse. They've been sent back to prison and they are not receiving the treatment that they need to help them overcome this addiction. And we need your help. What can we do? How can we get involved? And so I think that's important for folks to know.
Just to let you know, you have about 20 minutes left.
Okay.
In your time.
And I'm definitely loving the questions. And so I just want to, before I answer any more questions, I just want to say that I just want to reiterate the reason why we have 2.2 million people in prison is because of 50 years of tough on crime policy that has been passed at the federal level and has incentivized states to pass similar legislation that has filled up prisons. And so what is going to take to solve this problem, to reduce our prison population? We need the federal government to put forth legislation that's going to reverse the harmful legislation that has caused this problem. And currently in Congress, there's a piece of legislation called the Reverse Mass Incarceration Act. And that legislation ultimately reversed the harm of the 1994 crime bill, which is a piece of legislation that our current President Joe Biden advocated for its passage when he was a senator, and it was signed into law by then President Bill Clinton. And that piece of legislation is the reason why our prison population has skyrocketed in addition to the war on drugs and the tough on crime policies that were introduced during the Nixon era. And so we need to get informed on these issues. We need to get involved, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable, because any transformational change is going to come is going to come about in the form of legislation. We need something that is a little bit more sustainable, and we need our elected officials at the federal, local, and state level to put forth legislation that's going to do just that. That's going to repair the harm that has been caused to communities of color throughout this country. And so only way that's going to happen is with you all support, with you all getting involved. When I was at the ACLU, we had a youth program where we were educating the young folks about the justice system. We were educating them about ways in which they can get involved. And so wherever you are located, and within the sound of my voice, there are organizations, there are groups who are working on this issue. I encourage you all to get involved with those groups. I would encourage you to continue to ask questions. I would encourage you all to speak with someone who is impacted by the justice system, because they're going to give you a perspective that you normally would not hear. They're going to give you a perspective that you're not going to hear in a college campus. They're going to give you a perspective that you're not going to get from a book on criminal justice or a book written by a criminal justice academic. So I would encourage you to continue to ask questions, continue to attend conferences where impacted individuals will be speaking, and to just get involved, because this can easily be you, or it can easily be someone that you love, or that someone that you care about. And so instead of waiting until that happens, until someone who is proximate to you are impacted by this issue, I will encourage you to get involved and to advocate on behalf of those who can't advocate for themselves, and work to bring about a system that really reflects the values that we all hold as Americans, that everyone should be treated equitably and justly. And so with that, I'll go back to answering you all's questions. I know I have 15 minutes left. And so I don't know how you all want to go about, how you all want to do the questions. I can go through the chat myself, or
Yeah, I thought let's, Alexa, do you mind unmuting and asking your question? You had a good question in the chat. So Alexa, if you want to, and anyone else who wants to ask a question, you can feel free to either put it in the chat, or you can use the hand raise button, because I'm sure Sean would like to hear from you. And where you're when you raise your hand, if you could say where in the world you are from, because we have different people here. So Alexa, you had a question in chat though. Did you want to ask it?
Yeah. I'm Alexa. I'm from Berlin, Wisconsin. And I asked, how do you feel about large companies such as Starbucks using US prison populations to manufacture their goods with little to no compensation? Do you think this is an effective means of punishment? Meaning, like, does it give people a purpose and prepare them for the real workforce? Or do you think this is exploitation?
I definitely think that it is exploitation. Anytime you are paying someone below the minimum wage to do work that you're not able to pay folks in general society to do, I definitely think that's exploitation, and that contributes to modern day slavery. That's why we have private prisons in private corporations who are using prison labor to manufacture certain goods and items. And I'm certain, we all have, I assure you, we all have something in our house, in our classroom, in our school that has been made in a prison. I assure you, that's how far and wide these companies reach is, and we're just not aware of what it is. But I assure you that there is things that has been made in a prison by someone at a low wage.
Okay, Jalen, you had a question. You can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I'm Jalen Moore. I'm from Brookfield, Wisconsin. And my question to you is, when you're working for Dream Corp, what does your day-to-day activities look like? And did you have to go to college to do this career?
So I didn't have to go to college, but I do have some college, and I'm currently in college right now, finishing up an associate's degree in criminal justice. And basically, my lived experience is more valuable than any 4-year degree that I can possibly attain. Because the work that I am doing right now, I'm doing as a result of my lived experience in the education I acquired over 17 years. I just wasn't presented with a degree. And so everything that a college student has done in 4, 6, 8 years, I've done. I've doubled that. I've pretty much done it in 17 years, and I haven't been given a degree, but I have. I've spoken in universities and colleges throughout this state. I was just recently a co-instructor at Marquette University for a program that Professor Mike Carrier is also an architect on. And so my lived experience has afforded me the knowledge base that I need to speak to this subject and to come into these type of spaces to inform. And so my day-to-day activity or work at Dream Corp is waking up to a ton of emails, checking in on multiple states throughout the country, checking in with my organizers throughout the country and seeing how they're, moving the work forward, what meetings they have on their calendar, and how we're planning to grow and impact change, not only in those respective states, but throughout this country.
Okay, Alex, you have your hand raised.
Yes, hi, I'm Alex. I live in Iowa City, Iowa, and I currently just started reading The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is a book kind of really related to what you were just talking about the relationship between mass incarceration and old Jim Crow laws. I was wondering if you had any other book recommendations that kind of are related to the subjects you've been discussing today, because I'm a big reader, so I'd love to read books on that.
Yes, there is a lot. If possible, I can riddle them off, but if possible, I can give that list to Professor Mike Carrier and he can get that to you. Would that be okay?
Yes, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Yep. I'd be happy to do that too. So, yep.
Okay, Isabel, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm from Brookfield, Wisconsin. And what I was wondering is, do the programs offered through the prison system, like such as education or church services, ever create like a positive sense of community between prisoners? And then how effective do you think that these programs are overall?
So there are certain they do offer some programs. For example, the Earned Release program, which again, that is a treatment program for substance abuse. But there are programs such as Restorative Justice, which allows individuals to come to terms with their offense and to understand the harm that they've caused their victim. And also in certain instances, it allows that individual to meet with their victim and to make amends, to provide the victim with some clarity as to why they perpetrated that act of violence against them. Oftentimes, the justice system does that. And not even oftentimes, the justice system does not do that at all. What happens is a person is sent to prison to languish and the victim is sent home to deal with the trauma that they have, that they are experiencing as a result of the crime that has been perpetrated against them. And so that program in particular is a very effective program that the prisons offer. There are vocational programming that is offered within the prison that allows individuals to acquire job training skills that supports them upon their release. There are many individuals that I know personally who took machine tool programming while they were in prison and are currently working at some well-paying jobs, that as a result of the training that they received from prison, in addition to educational programming that prisons provide. I know MATC here, Milwaukee Area Technical College, has a program with the prisons in Wisconsin. And Professor Carrier's program, the Educational Readiness Program, is another program that is providing impacted folk or incarcerated people with the tools that they need to be successful upon release and be able to contribute to their communities.
Okay, maybe one or two more questions we have time for. So Nicole, you can go ahead, please.
Hello, my name's Nicole. I'm from Vincent, Ohio. I know you mentioned that there were some groups and programs that supported what you've been talking about today. Could you give me an example of some of those that we could get involved with?
So you are in Ohio?
Yes.
So I will definitely encourage you to reach out to the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio, and you can tell them that Sean Wilson told you to reach out to them, and they should be able to connect you with the Smart Justice program there. In fact, in Ohio, they're working on bail reform, and so there are some great folks at the ACLU of Ohio who are working on that there and who would love to connect with you and get you involved in the work that they're doing. And there are other organizations, but I'll just recommend starting with the ACLU, and from there, I'm sure they would connect you with their coalition partners.
right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take Jocelyn and Kaylee as our last two questions. So Jocelyn, you can go ahead, please.
I'm Jocelyn. I'm from Iowa City. My question is kind of similar to Isabel's, but how well do you think that the prison system does in offering and supporting incarcerated people in taking college level classes or job training? And then do you think that by offering more classes and more education opportunities to people who are incarcerated, do you think that would help lower the incarceration rate?
Absolutely. I think currently that the prison system doesn't do a good job at providing educational programming to folks who are currently incarcerated. Me, for example, everything that I've acquired while I was in prison was a result of my own self-determination. However, I believe if they were providing educational opportunities for individuals, specifically for your formal education in the form of a degree, I believe that that will contribute to the recidivism rate being lowered, because individuals attaining education allows them to come out and get a job without necessarily getting the door slammed in their face, because that is something that employers look at, is whether or not an individual has gone to college and has attained a degree. And it will also provide individuals to get jobs that actually pays a livable wage.
Okay, and final question from Kaylee.
So I'm interested in working at a nonprofit similar to Dream Corp, an organization like the ACLU. I was wondering what sort of jobs or positions, like maybe social workers, what kind of people do you guys need in these organizations for jobs?
I would say that we need folks who are committed, folks who are committed to doing the work, folks who are committed to bringing about a change, and folks who are empathetic, folks who understands that, this is a system that not only the justice system, but all systems where people are impacted needs to change. The system of white supremacy racism is a system that needs to be dismantled and disrupted. And if you are someone who is committed to doing that, then nonprofit organizations that has that as a mission will love to have you on staff. And so I encourage you to seek out those organizations, and also seek out organizations who are interested in interns, which will allow you to, get a feel of if that is something that you want to do. And also, I'm going to drop our organization's link in the chat, and I will definitely encourage you all to check our website out. And also, folks who are in Iowa, I'm going to be doing some work in Iowa. And so please feel free to connect with me, because I will be looking for folks in the Iowa area to volunteer to engage their elected officials around justice reform issues. So if you are interested in doing that, please feel free to connect with me.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Thank you very much. Could we give Sean just an applause, or maybe even a standing ovation? I know I'm going to stand and at my computer here and maybe just applaud and things like that, because Sean, this was very, very enlightening and informative for the delegates and for all of us. So Stuart and Dr. Carrier, I'm going to throw it to you for any closing announcements, please.
Dr. Carrier, do you have anything to add before I jump in?
No, I just wanted to reiterate what Greg said and thank Sean for his time, and thank you all for the wonderful questions and for being such an engaged audience. So thank you so much for all parties involved.
Perfect. I'll echo the same. we are going to be moving to a short break. We have about a half an hour before we go back into our small groups. In our small groups, you'll spend a little bit of time, if you were able to attend one of the breakout sessions yesterday, I encourage you to spend a little bit of time in your small group in dialogue about what you learned in the breakouts yesterday. Since not everybody was able to attend all of them, spend a little bit of time talking with each other about your session so that you can hear from the others about theirs. And then of course, afterwards, we will have a new round of breakout speakers. So make sure to see the agenda for those. Other than that, I'll just say thank you again to Sean for being here. And I hope you all have a good half an hour away. We'll see you back soon.
Thank you all.